Morning, Bob.
You're live, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Kim. We will call the Senate Ag Committee meeting to order, and Kim, would you please call the roll?
That's okay. Senator French.
Here.
Senator Hicks.
Excused.
Senator Ide.
Here.
Senator Kolb.
Present.
Senator Larson.
Here.
Chairman Steinmetz.
Here. All right, everyone. Welcome, Senator Barlow. You are first up today with Senate File 73, Concealed Firearms Permit Eligibility. Take it away.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, members of the committee. I appreciate you taking the time to listen to this bill. This is something was brought to the attention of numerous legislators post Senate File 120. As you'll recall, last year Senate File 120 was the restoration of firearms rights, and by the legislature, basically making a level of restoration that is automatic based on certain criteria: nonviolent, one-time, felons, 5-year, and then there's a 5-year component. They have the rest of theirs. What has occurred currently in Wyoming statute, if you were convicted that one-time nonviolent felon was under the Controlled Substance Act, let's say for 3 ounces of marijuana or more, you are ineligible to then qualify for a concealed carry permit, a concealed firearm permit. You are ineligible. That is what this bill rectifies. You would be ineligible if the governor had restored your right as well as under current law. It would only be if it was a pardon would you be eligible for it. So, ladies and gentlemen, here's the discrepancy that occurs. As you know, in Wyoming, we have a constitutional carry ability. You do not have to have a permit to carry in a concealed manner, depending on where you are, of course, but as a rule. So actually, we create this dichotomy creates a challenge, as you are able to carry constitutionally, but not with a permit in this exact. So what we're trying to do with this bill is rectify that. If your rights are restored, you will be eligible for a concealed firearm permit that is issued through our Attorney General's office, or DCI, and have the full rights that you would have had you not been convicted under one state law, and the singular prohibition against just a conviction that had to do with controlled substances. So, Madam Chairman, I think it's that simple. Just so for the committee's edification, and I didn't look at it as of last week, 478 citizens of Wyoming had applied for and received the restoration of their rights under Senate File 120, which have been in effect since July 1st of 2023. Thank you, Madam Chairman. I stand for any questions.
All right, thank you, Senator. Any questions? Senator Ide.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Senator Barlow, could you kind of give us a hypothetical? Just so I'm thinking, so somebody gets a controlled substance felony, so say for marijuana, whatever amount, maybe dealing in marijuana, and they were sentenced, maybe a small, maybe not even jail time, and they were released, and they say their sentence. It's kind of hard to give an example. So they could restore their rights in 10 years. Or are you saying after 5 years, after they've served their sentence and paid their debt to society, at that point in time, they can get their rights restored, or is it 5 years after whatever the sentence was? I'm a little bit foggy on a particular example. So if somebody asked me, if I get my rights back, can I go get a legal carry permit? So if it sounds like you know this pretty good, and it would help me understand that. Thank you.
Go ahead, Senator.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So under current law, and this includes what we changed last year. Under current law, if you are a one-time nonviolent felon, you will have your voting rights restored as soon as all of your sentence and probation parole are completed. So it's an automatic restoration for your voting rights. And then with Senate File 120 last year, we made the rest of your rights, the right to hold office, the right to serve as a juror, and the right to possess firearms, 5 years after that same completion of sentence, jail time, etc., probation, parole. So it's automatic for your voting rights, and then it's 5 years post that, post the same time point for the rest of your rights. And in that, so at that 5-year mark for a one-time nonviolent felony, be clear that's what we're talking about, then it's automatic for the remainder of your rights. Now, if there's anything that happens in those succeeding, in those interim years, another felony, then you're ineligible, and you would be permanently ineligible, because recall, restoration is one time, nonviolent felony. And you'd be then you would have a lifetime prohibition, which is what we had prior to that as well, prior to Senate File 120 and prior to 2017 when we made the voting rights automatic as well. I hope that clarifies where we are in the time frame. Is automatic for voting rights upon completion, 5 years post that time frame for the remainder of the rights, Madam Chairman.
All right, follow up?
Just a quick follow-up. Thank you, Madam Chair. Senator Barlow, in essence, they're getting their full civil rights back after that 5-year period of time, after they can vote, they can carry a firearm. Are they restricted anywhere else as far as this bill would entail? Yeah.
Madam Chairman, the only place that are restricted is that if it was a controlled substance conviction, they would not be eligible for a concealed firearm permit, which this bill is trying to eliminate that prohibition. Thank you,
Okay,
Madam
all
Chairman.
right. Further questions for the sponsor, Senator Kolb?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chairman. Senator Barlow, I get a few questions. I'll just start with probably the one that's top on my list. Is the purpose of this for restoration of your rights for a concealed carry permit solely lies within the state of Wyoming? Or is the purpose of this to have reciprocity throughout the rest of the United States? That I'm unclear of. And then I'll just ask two questions, if you don't mind. The other one is if it is for federal restoration of a concealed carry right, isn't that going to directly conflict with federal regulations and jeopardize our other folks here that would use their concealed carry in Wyoming as a vehicle to get reciprocity in other states? There's lots of different mechanisms to do this, but just those two broad questions, Senator, if you could help me out with those.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you for the questions. Reciprocity is something that is state to state. I do not know the role that the federal government would have in reciprocity. Reciprocity is something that the state of Wyoming will recognize a restoration or many other things in the from South Dakota, and there's a list on the on the Department of Criminal Investigations website about the states that we have basically automatic reciprocity with. We recognize them, they recognize us, and I do, Madam Chairman. So yes, if someone in Wyoming has a concealed firearm permit, there is reciprocity with other states because we recognize their concealed firearm permit. As to the question about the federal nexus, again, I do not know what the federal nexus is for interplay with that reciprocity. I think that is a states' rights issue. Now, there's a qualifier in that there is a question, and it was a question under the law before we amended it, whether the state of Wyoming can restore the rights of someone who is convicted under federal law. That is a different issue, and it is actually being played out right now with folks there. Now, I think it's my view that the federal government says you can't restore rights. Interestingly, that's what current Wyoming law says. Current Wyoming, before we changed Senate File 120, it actually says that the governor can restore those federal rights. I did not alter, 120 did not alter that, and I do not think this speaks to that issue specifically. This is a restoration under Wyoming law for the ability to have a concealed firearm permit, which is absolutely in our purview, in my view, Madam Chairman.
All right, go ahead, follow up.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chairman. Yeah, and I have no issue about, just to be clear, I'm trying to find out how it relates to the state of Wyoming. I don't have an issue about that in the state of Wyoming. I think probably we are a lot better ground, but the federal issue, I'm concerned, and I think it hasn't played out yet. I understand the reciprocity and how it works throughout states, but I was concerned if they traded swapped licenses, you have reciprocity, or you go to Utah, you get a Utah concealed carry, and then with that, you have a lot more reciprocity. My concern is that we don't have any control over federal regulations, although I do believe we do have over state. So I was wondering, that's why I was asking those questions. Appreciate your answers, though. Thank you, Senator
All
Barlow.
right, thank you. Any further questions for the sponsor? Seeing none, stick around and we'll
Thank
bring
you,
you
Madam
up
Chairman.
after we
Thank you, committee.
close public testimony. All right, is there any department here wishing to testify on this bill? Seeing none, we'll go to public testimony. Public testimony on this bill? Come on up. Welcome to the Senate Ag Committee. State your name and who you're with, and give us your comment today.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman and committee. My name is Mark Jones. I'm a national director with Gun Owners of America, and we represent about 3 million Americans. I live in Johnson County, and of course, we represent many thousands of members here in the state of Wyoming. Gun Owners of America supports the concepts involved in the restoration of rights process. We believe nonviolent felons should have their rights restored. But there are unintended consequences that have resulted from this process that are very real and have impacted Wyoming citizens already. And I need to explain some of that to this committee, if you'll indulge me. And nothing in my comments should be construed to think that we support what ATF does. We fight ATF in Congress and in the courts on a routine basis. But we all have to be aware of what can happen to citizens when they run afoul of what the federal government thinks they should be doing. We expressed concerns in this process last year that the restoration of rights process was flawed. And we tried to convey that to members of the Wyoming legislature. There were 3 main areas we were concerned about. Number one, it was not necessary to put gun control in the Wyoming statutes to restore rights. Prior to 2023, nonviolent felons did not lose their gun rights under Wyoming law. I want everybody to remember that. Number two, the process that was used and is currently in the statutes requires the state of Wyoming to notify the ATF when a nonviolent felon's rights are restored. There is no statutory obligation for corrections to notify any other federal law enforcement entity. ATF is under no obligation to communicate with the FBI, and they're notorious for not communicating with each other. It would be highly possible. Now, I understand this is being handled administratively by the state of Wyoming right now because we brought this to light through after the bill passed last year. We informed corrections and they understood that we were correct. And I understand that they're handling this administratively, but it's not in the statutes. So a nonviolent felon could get their rights restored. FBI could not know, because the statutes doesn't require the state to tell FBI. They could go try to buy a firearm, and that's who runs the federal criminal instant background check system, is the FBI. And the third flaw is you have to be very careful there are attorneys who specialize in nothing but the restoration of rights. And you have to be very careful about the nexus between state rights and federal rights. And that has come to light since this process was implemented in July of 2023. In November of 2023, ATF raided the home of some individuals, and I can tell you privately, I won't publicly tell you who they were or where they were in Wyoming. drugged one of the individuals from the home in their underwear, kept them in a car for 6 hours. They came full bore with automatic weapons, drones, the whole 9 yards. And this individual was screaming, "I have a certificate signed by the governor of Wyoming. I have a certificate signed by the governor of Wyoming. Let me show you my certificate. Let me show you my certificate." He was finally allowed to show ATF that certificate. This individual and his significant other are currently engaged in a legal battle with ATF that hasn't been resolved. They have 2 attorneys, one in their home county, one that we help them find that specializes in federal firearms crimes. One of the unintended consequences that we were concerned about from this process last year has come to light in at least this case. This individual's significant other was not a nonviolent felon, but this person is also caught up in this process. All of their firearms were taken by ATF, including hers, and she was not a nonviolent felon. House Bill 176 that Representative Harrelson introduced.
Okay, hang on just a sec. Let's not go into
Okay.
another bill.
Sorry,
Let's
Madam
let-
Chair.
No, that's okay.
I'll jump ahead.
So we're giving you some leeway to explain the situation.
One more thing real quick, if I may, about the ATF letter.
Okay, that would be, let's do that, and then let's get back to this bill because we have limited time today.
Yes,
But we appreciate you informing us of the actions of our ratifying the last bill.
Thank you. So anyway, I will fast forward to Valentine's Day this year, last Wednesday. ATF sent a letter to every FFL in the state of Wyoming. And the letter basically says, and I'm going to paraphrase it, you can read it for yourselves. It basically says the state of Wyoming is erroneously issuing restoration of rights certificates to individuals with federal nonviolent felonies. That may explain the raid that happened in November. I don't know. My recommendation, again, would be that this committee look very carefully at what we're doing and that we ensure that we're not setting up Wyoming citizens for problems with the federal government. We fully support that we believe nonviolent felons should have their rights back. We disagree with ATF on many issues. And we disagree with the federal prohibitions. This is in no way meant to support ATF, but we all have to be very careful that we're telling Wyoming citizens something they can do that puts them in the crosshairs of federal law enforcement agencies. So I would urge caution. I believe it's too late in this session to fix all these problems. If you guys can magically amend these bills and fix all this, that'd be great, but I don't know that we can. It's probably going to have to be handled administratively with the governor's office and the attorney general between now and next year. Our attorneys who work in the Supreme Court and work with the ATF on a regular basis will be happy to assist with this process. We need to get the gun control out of the Wyoming statutes. It plays no role in this. We need to make sure we're notifying the proper federal agencies, and we need to be very careful what we say we're doing regarding federal convictions. And I appreciate your indulgence in the time, committee, and Madam Chairwoman, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. And so just give me your concerns with this bill right here, what's before us today.
With all the other problems in the statutes, I would be cautious of the unintended consequences of telling people they have a concealed carry permit. We would certainly support them having one, but again, we've already seen unintended consequences from this restoration of rights process that need to be addressed very carefully by the legislature, the governor's office, and the attorney general.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Questions? Questions for gun owners? Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, just, I guess, reiterate the issue about having to notify the federal government when the rights are restored. So basically, if I understand this right, you're telling them right where to look.
Well, Senator Kolb, I'm sorry, Madam Chairwoman, sorry for that. Senator, that's required. There's no way to do this without notifying the federal government because the federal government already knows these nonviolent felons are prohibited. So it's important when and if the state does restore their rights that all the federal agencies are notified, not just ATF. It's important that the FBI also be notified because they're going to find out when this person goes to try to buy a firearm, and that could put them in jeopardy of federal charges.
All right. Any further questions, Senator Ide?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, Mark, for your testimony. Can you give us an example, or me, I don't quite understand, when you referenced a federal nonviolent felony versus a state, could you explain that a little bit? Thank you.
Go ahead.
Madam Chairwoman, Senator, I believe the particular case that I know about in this state where a person is facing federal charges right now, today, involved a federal drug crime 20 years ago. But he has a restoration of rights certificate in his hand issued by the state of Wyoming in August. I think it was August 23, 2023. I have a copy of it. It was a federal drug charge.
All right, any further questions? Further questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Thank you, committee. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman.
All right, further public testimony on this bill. Further public comment? Is there anyone online, Kim?
No, Madam Chairman, no one's
One
online.
online. All right, with that, public comment is closed. Committee, what's your pleasure?
Move the bill.
Moved by Ide, seconded by Larson. Amendments on the bill? Any amendments? Do you have anything else to offer, good sponsor of the bill, Senator Barlow?
Madam Chairman, thank you. Just to walk the bill real quick, if you would like.
Okay, go ahead.
Madam Chairman, if you'll look, there's only one small part of a sentence that's being
Right.
added to current statute. This is, and it talks about restoration, just so the committee is aware. 713-105A is what was in existing statute prior to Senate File 120, and that is the governor's ability to restore someone's rights. F was what the legislature added last year under Senate File 120. So one was existing law at the time, for some period of time, and one was what we changed last year. You'll notice that the only way you're eligible on line 20 is if you were pardoned previously. Pardoned. So restorations played no role, unless this bill is passed, in a restoration had no role in allowing someone to have a concealed firearm. They would be permanently barred from having a concealed firearm based on our Wyoming law without this bill. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
All right, any questions? I do have one, just with the comments that were brought up before. Do you believe this bill addresses any of those or even further complicates the issue in any way?
Madam Chairman, first of all, it's the first time I've ever heard Mr. Jones speak, and I've never been contacted by gun owners to visit about their concerns. So I can't speak to the specifics. I hear second and third hand some of those concerns. I can assure you, in visiting with Representative Harrelson, who was spoken about earlier in the comments, that I have a much longer view of what we're doing with restoration of rights, because I believe citizens should have their full rights when they've paid their due to society. And there is much more to do, I believe. Some of the things that were mentioned, I think they will be accommodated as we go forward, if I'm involved in it. As far as this particular issue, I agree that the federal nexus with federal convictions has always been a gray area. It's a gray area before Senate File 120 was in place. It was a gray area, and if you actually examine the statutes, it's actually under the governor's authority for restoration that federal law is spoken about. It is not explicitly mentioned in the bill that we had last year in Senate File 120. So I think there is even a disparate view or a potential disparity within that. But this bill, Madam Chairman, if you look at the bill title,
encourage constitutionally protected firearm ammunition purchases and sales within this state. And then we create some new statutes. 139, 122 on page 4. At the very, on the top of page 5, it states a government entity is liable for damages resulting from the violation of this statute which is caused by the negligent, reckless, or intentional acts of the public employees while acting within the scope of their duties. Describes that this gives us the definitions. We go through assignments, means a credit card processor, policy processor practice that labels, links, or otherwise associates a firearms code with a merchant or payment card transaction. Page 5 defines a credit card processor, a customer, what a disclosure means, what a financial record means.
I think that's page 6, isn't it?
Yes, I'm sorry, that was on page 6, yes, sorry,
That's all right. I just wanted to make sure we're all on the same page.
yes, sorry about that.
Nope.
Then on page 7, we describe a firearms code, means a code assigned to a merchant or a transaction that identifies the purchase of a firearm or ammunition. We give the definition of firearms retailer, what a government entity is. And then at the last, at the end, or on the page, end of page 7 on line 19, it tells us what defines protected financial information. Means any record of sale, purchase, return, or refund involving a payment card that is retrieved or characterized or generated, labeled, or sorted and grouped based on the assignment of a firearm code. On page 8, we create the prohibition on data collection. It says no government agency, employee of the state or other governmental entity or any other person, public or private, shall knowingly keep any list or record of privately owned firearms or owners of firearms. And then B, it says no credit card processor shall require the usage of a firearm or ammunition merchant category code separate from general merchandise codes. On the bottom of page 8, we put in a title for civil actions. Essentially, it says the Attorney General may investigate alleged violations of this act. Then it tells how what actions the Attorney General can take. Notice will be given, and if the violation isn't ceased within 30 days, then she or the Attorney General can pursue an injunction against any person or entity. And in B at the bottom, it says a court may order an injunction in addition to any other relief as the court may consider appropriate. And then on the page 10, we delve into the statute on granting immunity from tort liability. And this statute would be put in that paragraph. And then at the end, the act is effective on July 1, 2024.
All right, committee, questions? Questions for Senator Larson? I have a couple, just being in retail, about how this actually works in practice. So who notifies the merchant that this is the case and that these things, would be prohibited? How are they notified, and who enforces that?
Who notifies the merchant that they're being collected?
No, who notifies the merchant that it's no longer lawful for them to have firearms tracked as a category through their credit card processing system or any of that? Because in order for the two systems to interact, I, as a merchant in my point of sale, have to have it in there that it's a it's a firearms or ammunition purchase in my point of sale, which then transmits it to the credit card company, which then has the ability to put that in a certain category. How does that work?
Madam Chairman, I would need help on that. I'm probably gonna need to get back to you on that. I don't know the process on how that goes about. I would guess that if, I'm thinking that if somebody had a list and they used the list inappropriately to tag people, those individuals would be the one that would contact the Attorney General, is what I would say.
Okay, well, I might try to help you with that, because I'm definitely supportive of your legislation. I was just trying to figure out how it actually is put into practice for a retailer on the ground of that does this kind of business.
That would be great.
All
I don't
right.
know if,
Okay, any further questions for the sponsor of the bill? All right, seeing none, is there anybody else here who would like to testify on this bill?
Madam Chairman,
Yes,
can I
go
make
ahead.
a comment? I do
Yes,
have
go ahead.
I do have an amendment that was provided by a gun.
Oh, well, bring it up.
Alrighty. And
Yep,
I
we'd
would,
love to see that amendment while we consider the bill.
okay, and it'd be great if those that gave me the amendment would help me out. I think it's up there. Senator Ide has a pile there, two piles.
Great.
If you could share those. And I don't know if you want the amendment now or if you would like to have comment.
Well, just tell us a little bit about what the amendment does, just so we know what you're looking to do.
It takes out banks in certain places on page 3, line 2. We're trying to take out direct contact about a credit card, and we're trying to change in places like on page 5, line 18. We're putting in, or we're taking out credit card. Can I get some help on this? I'm sorry.
Sure. Whose
Those that
amendment
brought
is
this
it?
forward would be great.
Was
Nephi help me with it?
Nephi's? All right. Come on up, phone a friend. Come on up, Nephi, and welcome to the Ag Committee. Please state your name and who you're with, and let us know about the amendment as well.
Madam Chairman, members of the committee, I'm Nephi Cole, that's Nephi-Cole. I'm the Director of Government Relations and State Affairs for the National Shooting Sports Foundation. We are the Firearms Trade Association of America, so we represent every manufacturer, retailer, and distributor of firearms in the United States of America. We have about 10,500 members, and they are the professional side of the firearm space that work on these issues. First of all, I just wanted to quickly thank the sponsors of this bill. They've been phenomenal, and that's all of the co-sponsors and the sponsors specifically. This is a critical issue for our industry. I also wanted to say that we've worked hand in hand with the Wyoming Credit Unions and Banking Association. They've been phenomenal in both understanding our concerns and then working with us to address their concerns and make sure that concerns of all involved were handled here. So there are a few general things that we tried to do, these amendments do. So first, I think I need to explain what a merchant category code is and who applies it. So the merchant category code is a code that is assigned by a provider of financial services. It's a code that you don't get to pick it. It's assigned to you that classifies what your business is when you do electronic transfers, when you do electronic purchases. So for example, right now, if you sell sporting goods, that's where firearms entities are typically there. But somebody would come look at your store and they'd say, well, you're a sporting goods manufacturer, so therefore, here's your merchant category code, sporting goods. If you made, if you were a retail point of sale like a Walmart, that's going to be general merchandise. That's going to be your merchant category code. If you sell cars, that's going to be your merchant category code. Now, what's unique about these codes is it actually doesn't matter what is being sold inside of the entity. So if I'm a sporting goods store and I sell a Twinkie to somebody, when that code goes across, that electronic code is transferred, what it shows that where you purchased, the merchant category code shows sporting goods. Doesn't show the Twinkie. Likewise, if you purchased a firearm at a Walmart, doesn't show firearms, it shows general merchandise. And so the reason that we're concerned about this code is that if the code is applied, let's say that you have a merchant acquiring entity. These are these entities that bundle and process these credit card services. They're going to decide what your code is. Well, if they decided that they were going to assign anyone that sells a firearm, or a majority of their business is firearms, if they're going to assign them this code, then now it gives somebody else further down the stream the ability not to see what's in the basket, but to know that that entity sells these things, sells firearms, and then to potentially use suspicious activity reports to dig further into what is sold. And so our primary concern is if somebody gives you this code, let's say that, a mom and pop gun shop, they say, you are a firearms, that's your new merchant category code. Well, the problem now becomes that further down the stream, that person can be denied access to credit services. So you could go into that entity and hand them your credit card. They could try to run that card and find out that somebody further down the stream has decided that that merchant category code cannot use a card for purchase. And so it stops essentially, legal commerce. And we're very concerned about that. And that's why we think that it's appropriate that this is handled appropriately. So within the bill, we looked in locations where it specified credit card. We wanted to make sure that it was clear that this isn't necessarily just a credit card issue. It's the assignment of the code is the issue. And so throughout the bill, we've tried to make that clear and clarify how the bill works throughout there, that it's all electronic transfers. The other thing that we worked with the sponsors and with the credit unions and banks on was to replace the payment processor language in the bill. So a payment processor some payment processors may assign a merchant category code, but that's not the only entity that can or does. And we wanted to make sure, and they were supportive of this, that we did two things. Number one, we captured all of the entities that can assign that code in the bill. And we did that by replacing payment processor with a new term that we called merchant servicer.
Okay, hang on just a second. I just want to make sure I know exactly what we're doing. So we had an amendment passed out, then we had a bill. I'm assuming that amendment is tracked into this bill and
It is.
that is what we're dealing with right now. Okay, just making sure. All right, go ahead.
It is, Madam Chair and members of the committee.
That is not. Okay. There's a little bit of confusion, so go ahead. Senator Larson, why don't you tell us what we're doing here?
Yes.
I want to make sure.
Yes, Madam Chairman, I did put the amendment inside the bill last night when I got time.
Okay.
So it is in there already.
Proposed amendment 1901 is now in this new copy that was just passed
that I
out.
handed
Is that
out,
correct?
Yes. So
Thank you.
So if you go to page 3,
Yes.
we have crossed out banks and
In page.
deleted that. So, and then you just keep on going down there. They are inside there.
3 line 2. Okay, gotcha. All right, and then there's some new language in red.
Yes, Madam Chair.
Okay.
Yes, Madam Chair, members of the committee. So the new language does 3 specific things. It replaces payment processor with the term merchant servicer. It's more encompassing. So it grabs all the entities that are assigning the merchant category code, but is also exclusive of the entities that do not. In Wyoming, our banks and our credit unions, they're not in the process of doing that. They're using other parties, a third party to do that. So this would make sure that it's clear that it's only those entities that are assigning the code that this applies to. The second large amendment defines the term merchant category code so that that is, because it's referenced in the bill. And so that goes back in other spots in the bill and makes sure that that code is defined. And then that is on page 7, line 20.
Okay,
On page 8, line 1, that is the term we're using, merchant servicer, to describe the payment settlement entities, merchant acquiring entities, and third parties that can assign or do assign these merchant category codes. And then on the same page, lines 19 through 23, there are certain legal requirements for keeping records on that. For example, federal firearms licensee is required to keep a copy of a Form 4473. And so this language here makes sure that when we're talking about the financial institutions who maintain or who have to maintain a record, for example, of purchases like a credit union or a bank that are more specific, or if you have to keep a document like a 4473, that would not run afoul of this law.
okay, so do you have the 26 USC 605W, what that is, the 18 USC 920? Because, and that's the federal firearm license requirements, I get it, but when we're putting federal law into state statute, I always like to know what we're doing. I didn't bring my computer down. This is a new amendment to us, so I would appreciate by the end of this testimony knowing what those are and what exactly they say. And so that helps for our consideration to look at the amendment. I think we need to go on with public testimony. Mr. Cole, did you have anything to testify on the bill besides the amendment you've read in and some of your ancillary comments?
Madam Chairman, members of the committee, I think that's sufficient, and I will find that reference for you right now.
Okay, that would be wonderful. All right, Senator Kolb, did you have a question?
Yeah, yes, I did, Chairman. Probably goes to, I don't know, whoever wants to comment about this, probably Nephi, I suspect, but the findings, the legislative findings under Section 1, do you find that they're necessary? I mean, what is your opinion about that kind of statement in a statute that we're trying to, what we're trying to accomplish here, statutorily? What's your opinion about the need for that?
Go
Thank you,
ahead.
Madam Chair.
Yep.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, Senator, I think that the bill functions adequately. I don't think you have to have the legislative findings in order to have the bill function as it should. While I think that it's practice in many states to have that as part of their informing legislators about certain aspects of the bill, I don't think this bill, I don't think it harms or helps the bill. I think it's vestigial to have those findings. In this case, I would say we've passed this bill over the last year in 8 other states. And so when you see, a lot of the commentary from this, there's a certain DNA of these bills nationally that sometimes some of that stuff is included.
All right, any further questions from the committee? All right, seeing none, it looks like we have a couple other folks who have joined us. Go ahead and state your name, who you're with, and give us your public comment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Bobby Frank, representing Wyoming's 21 credit unions. We did work collaboratively on these amendments. With the amendments, we are comfortable with the bill. As Senator Larson indicated, the bill as it is similar, if not exactly the same as last year's bill, which we were concerned with. The change in the definition to merchant servicer ensures that we're getting to the entities that actually establish the code. When we use credit card processor, that's a much larger universe and could inadvertently include your credit unions. Credit unions do not have any control over the adoption or assignment of the code. So the concern in the past has been holding credit unions liable for an action that they don't have any control over. Frankly, they prefer the code not be adopted or assigned. They frankly are Wyoming citizens, most are gun owners, and they don't care to be in a position of being liable for an action that, again, they don't have any control over. We're also very supportive of the amendment that recognizes we agree that should the code go into effect, which the bill is intended to prevent, that our records in and of themselves are not going to cause an issue for our credit unions, but concur that those records shouldn't be used to create lists of the individuals purchasing and owning guns. With that, Madam Chair, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Thank you. Any questions? Committee, any questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. All right, next in line.
Madam Chairman, members of the committee, Scott Meyer on behalf of the Wyoming Bankers Association. I will just say that I agree with everything that Ms. Franks just said about the credit unions. Banks are in that same position, and we don't have anything to do with codes. So we appreciate the bill and the amendments that go with that. So.
All right, thank you very much. Any questions? Senator Ide.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a quick question for the panel. Kind of goes back to the old saying, it doesn't matter who votes, it's who counts the votes. How do you know who's putting the codes on, and how do you understand whether you're getting sucked into surveillance on what you're selling as far as firearms go? Thank you, Madam Chair.
I think, Mr. Cole, that's probably directed at you.
Madam Chair and members of the committee, this is actually very challenging and complex process. But in general, as a merchant, when you sign up for electronic payment services, you're going to seek a service provider that then is going to help you set up your operation, your electronic payments and whatnot. Someplace in that process, and it depends on who the acquirer is. It depends on what entity came to you to provide you those services. And that's why it needs to be more encompassing than just a processor, because it doesn't necessarily mean it's the processor, but somebody came to you and helps you set up your electronic business. That's the entity that is going to assign you that code. Now, the way that works, that code didn't used to be available, but an international group made that code available and has been, this is the current administration has been pushing entities to assign that code. Here's what we know right now. That code is turned off in every state and will not be available, according to Visa, nationally, to any state that has a law like this. They're just going to make sure that that code cannot be assigned. There are states that are going to require it. So some of the language in this bill, for example, mentions that this relates to an entity in Wyoming, and that language was pre-existing in the bill. And the reason is because California is going to require, if you're a firearms retailer in California, you're going to have the code. And so nationally, Visa's making sure that that code cannot be assigned in any state where the law prohibits it. And then they will assign it in any state like California, like after this year, likely Colorado, Oregon, Washington, states that require it. So we think it is absolutely critical that we get these laws on the book in every state that we possibly can right now, so that there is not an application of the codes in those states.
Thank you. Senator Kolb.
Thank you, Chairman. I guess to anyone on the panel. So I'm going to ask the obvious question is, what the code you're going to use? I mean, it dawns on me, it's like, what are you going to use? I mean, and then when you pick a code, won't the federal government just know what that code is and track vis-a-vis that code, or is it going to be commingled with another code? I mean, how is it going to actually work? Thank you, Madam Chair.
Go ahead.
So Madam Chair, members of the committee, Senator Kolb, the way that the codes work is that basically it's whatever the majority of your sales are, that is the code that you are assigned. Now, right now, the codes, everybody has a code. So right now, if you're buying a firearm, it's under general merchandise, it could be under sporting goods. Now, we also have suggested that we not make it too specific. Like you say, somebody has to have a sporting goods code if they're a firearms retailer, because you may have a law firm and an FFL, and that may not be the code that applies to you or something, so for us, the main thing is this, and this bill actually does this. The bill says you cannot have a code that specifically allows you to know that it's a firearms entity. The bill says that very specifically. We think that that is exactly the right approach.
All right, further questions? Seeing none. All right, let's see if there's any other public comments. Any other public comment on the bill? Come on down. All right, welcome back.
Did it go well? There it goes. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Again, I'm Mark Jones. I'm a National Director with Gun Owners of America. We represent almost 3 million Americans. I live in Johnson County, Wyoming. We do support the concepts in this bill. We actually supported an effort last year in the House. Several states have these laws, including Idaho, Florida, and Ohio. Our attorneys evaluated those laws in relation to this one, and we offered amendments. I emailed those to the committee last night. I don't know how many of you had a chance to see those. I have.
Mr. Jones, we were up till 11 o'clock.
I understand.
So we have, yes, we would need a handout of those.
I have a
Very
copy.
good.
May I bring
Thank
it forward?
you. Yes, go ahead. Thank you very much. Oh my goodness, it's so small. Okay.
My apologies for that. I think our goals are similar to my colleague, Mr. Cole. I can go through our recommendations real quickly.
Did you have more copies?
I'm sorry, I didn't. I emailed it to everyone, but I did not bring more
Okay.
than marked paper copies.
All
My
right,
apologies.
That's all right. Okay, why don't you just give us the concept? If something is to occur with this, we'll probably have to do it on the floor because of the, we haven't had a chance to consider it, but go ahead.
Okay, my apologies for that. I understand you folks are very busy and probably didn't get to see your emails. Under 914-302 definitions, we recommend adding ammunition merchant category just as a fail-safe so that that's not tracked in the future. And similar to Mr. Cole, we, under 9-14-302 II, we wanted to expand the definition, clear up who could assign these codes, what are processors, so that there's no loopholes. Our goals are very similar to those of Mr. Cole there in that regard, regarding that particular item. Similarly, under that same section, 9-14-302 VI, we wanted to add ammunition. And I can slow down if you guys are keeping notes. I've got 3 or 4 more. I know you are crunched for time, and I'll go it.
So what I would advise at this point, just because of our time limitations and not having the time to get this distributed to everyone in a way that we can easily consume, could you work with the sponsor, the prime sponsor of the bill, and see if the two of you and Mr. Cole could all work together? And then if you want to bring a floor amendment, we can deal with that, each one of, because this one's fairly substantial as well.
Okay.
And in the future, if you, if we can know a little bit more ahead of time, we can get more prepared and make sure, we always need to have about 10 copies for the committee so that we have copies on file with our staff and for the public record. And so if we can do that in the future, then that will help us all expedite the process a little better. But we appreciate you being here and bringing this. Just tell us what your amendment would do, so that if you and the sponsor of the bill can get together on that, then we'll kind of know your general feeling about the bill and the components that, you know, in a general sense, you would like to see tightened up.
One more, yes, ma'am, and Madam Chairwoman, I apologize for not bringing more copies, and I will will say here, one other thing that is quite different from probably my colleague, we recommend that under penalties, that there be a criminal penalty. This is in keeping with our Second Amendment Protection Act, which was passed 2 years ago, that prescribes a criminal penalty for infringing upon the constitutional rights of individuals in Wyoming. And we believe that there should be 2 criminal penalties, one for keeping a registry and one for establishing a merchant category code. And again, that's in keeping with the Second Amendment Protection Act that Wyoming passed 2 years ago. And that is outlined in 9-14-304. So, we're concerned about the keeping of registries. I will point out that the National Shooting Sports Foundation represents the gun industry. Gun Owners of America represents the individual rights of American citizens. So we may look at this a little bit differently, but we kind of all want the same thing at the end of the day. We do not want people's firearms transactions tracked. And we believe that criminal penalties, we're not saying take the civil penalties out of here. We're saying leave those in, but also put criminal penalties into this bill. And with that, I'll stand for any comments.
All right, questions for Mr. Jones, committee? Questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. We appreciate it. We look forward to you working with the sponsor.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman and Senators.
All right, further public comment on this bill?
Madam Chair.
Welcome, welcome.
Madam Chair, my name is Alan Thompson. I'm the Executive Director of the Wyoming Association of Sheriffs and Chiefs of Police. And I understand that this is primarily a financial tracking bill, but if I could direct your attention to page 8, line 7, where it talks about no state government agency, and so on down to page 8, line 11. It specifically says, shall knowingly or willfully keep or cause to be kept any list, record, or registry. Law enforcement in the course of their work every day keeps a record. They don't have a list, they don't have a registry, but in order for us to properly do our jobs in cases involving firearms, we must have a record of that firearm. And when it's in evidence, we must have an accurate record of that firearm. And prior to the meeting today, I was able to provide a couple of suggestions for some wording that might exempt law enforcement from that normal course of business violating this bill should it pass into law. And I think, Madam Chair, you have that handout. There's a couple of suggestions there. One might be to strike the word record in both lines from line 12 and 13 on page 8, or going to a different subsection under, or approximately at page 8, line 15, that says something to the effect that nothing in this act shall prohibit or prevent accurate firearm record keeping pursuant to any firearm involved in a law enforcement investigation or any firearm lawfully seized or collected pursuant to a law enforcement investigation. I'd be happy to answer any more questions, but that's the general message that we would like to give to the committee, Madam Chair.
All right, thank you, Mr. Thompson. Any questions for Mr. Thompson? Questions? All right, while you're here, I might bring Senator Larson back up just to comment on your proposed amendment. Senator Larson, do you have thoughts on the proposed amendment while he's here?
It's right, yeah. And this isn't the amended bill, this is the bill that's still on the website.
Madam Chairwoman, I didn't see this earlier. I wish we would have caught up with each other. We definitely don't want to tie the hands of our law enforcement for sure.
All right.
So I would think this would be
Okay.
fine.
Thank you for that. Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Any questions? Seeing none. Is there any further public comment on this bill? We still have one more bill to do, so come on up. Welcome to the Ag Committee. State your name and who you're with, and give us your public comment.
All right. Thank you, Madam Chairman, members of the committee. Mark Moody, this is an ordinary citizen here in Laramie County. I support the bill. The only thing I would ask and suggest is does include firearm accessories, magazines, scopes, bump stocks, and again, pistol braces, because we've seen what has happened in other states with that. Just want to make sure that those aspects are corrected too. And I was just looking through firearms and firearm accessories can be included with ammunition.
All right,
Thank you.
thank you. Thank you very much. All right, further public comment? Any further public comment? Seeing none. Kim, is there anyone online?
No, Madam Chair, no attendees online.
All right, seeing none online and none in the room, public comment is closed. Committee, what's your pleasure? Moved by Cole, seconded by French.
Second.
All right. And Senator Larson, come on back up. All right, amendments on the bill. Are there any amendments to the bill? Senator Kolb.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would propose an amendment that we strike section 1, the preamble. Frankly, I'll bring this amendment because the green books are law. And I think we should make them as clean as possible for people to understand the law. And I find that section 1 to me in the green books adds nothing. So I would like that removed. That was my amendment.
All right,
Madam
it's
Chairman.
been moved by Kolb to strike all of section 1, which would be, start section 1, line 10 on page 1, all the way through page 4, line 15. Do I have a second on that motion? Second?
Second.
Seconded by French. Kim, do you understand what we're doing? All right. It's been moved and seconded. Discussion on the amendment. Discussion? Discussion, seeing none. Go ahead, Senator Colt.
Well, I agree with everything in the preamble. I agree with the statements in there, but I don't find it proper to put it in the green books. I mean, we have to have 20 extra volumes for all this stuff. And that's my issue. I think probably everyone's of the same mind when it comes to what this says. I just don't believe that's the right place. That's the reason why I brought the amendment, to explain myself to the committee. Thank you,
All
Madam
right.
Chairman.
Okay, are we ready to vote? All those in favor of the amendment, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. That amendment has passed. We're back on the bill, or has been adopted, not passed. It has been adopted. We're back on the bill. Any further amendments to the bill? Senator Larson? Oh, Senator French first, then Larson.
Not an amendment, Madam Chair. Just for some clarification. At one point, I believe you said if the bringer of the bill would work with a couple individuals to get their amendments in the bill. I need some clarification. Thank you.
All right, Senator French, I think that it might be great to work with, we have one large proposed amendment that was drafted by our staff from the bringer of the bill. We have one from Mr. Thompson from law enforcement, and then we have one that we didn't quite have enough copies, and that I had advised Mr. Jones from Gun Owners of America to work with Senator Larson for a possible floor amendment, unless Senator Larson wants to take some of his thoughts and add it to the bill on the fly here. So does that clear that up just a little bit?
A little bit.
All right, well, let's go to Senator Larson and see what he has to say.
Madam Chairwoman, I would like to move the amendment that I brought,
Okay,
the
so,
way it is.
all right. It's been moved by Larson, seconded by French. Kim, you have proposed amendment S 1901 that was tracked in and explained by by Mr. Cole. Okay, so everyone knows what we're voting on. It would be that second copy of the bill with the red lettering, with that amendment tracked in. Are there any questions on that amendment? Discussion on that amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. That amendment has been adopted.
Madam Chairman.
Senator Larson,
Madam Chairwoman, I would also like to move the amendment brought by the law enforcement gentleman. I can't remember his name. I
Mr.
think we have-
Thompson?
Mr. Thompson,
Okay,
yes.
Senator Larson, there are two options for you. There is one on page 8, line 12 and 13, where you strike the word record, or you can do page 8, line 15, and create a new section I, which says nothing in this act shall prohibit or prevent accurate firearm record keeping pursuant to any firearm involved in law enforcement investigation or any firearm lawfully seized or collected pursuant to a law enforcement investigation. Which one of those would you like to move?
The bottom one, page 8, line 15, create section.
A new subsection I. Does everyone understand the motion? Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved by Larson, seconded by Kolb. Any discussion on the amendment? Discussion, seeing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. That amendment has been adopted. Kim, did you get that one? All right. Are there any further amendments, Senator Larson?
Madam Chairwoman, I will visit with the gun owners of America and see if we might consider another amendment. I'm not real interested in what I saw. I don't think I want to bring a criminal action in this bill.
All right,
I think it might not be helpful.
all right. Okay, are there any further amendments on the bill? Senator Kolb?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yes, page 5, line 18. After firearms, insert or ammunition. And make the conforming amendments to fit that in if they need to be, comma, whatever needs to be.
Which bill are you on? Because I don't think our page
Well,
numbers are matching, so.
okay, I'm
let's
looking
use-
at the tracked-in one.
All right, let's use
Chair.
the official bill
The
that we
official bill,
are
okay, I gotta find it
working
now.
with, that the public has access to. So it'd be page 5, would that be line 20?
Trying to find it, Madam Chairman. Yes, Yes,
Page
it would be.
5, line 20, tell me what you want to do there.
after firearms, insert or ammunition.
Okay, and I think some of the wording we heard was firearm accessories as well. Did you want to add that, or?
I did not, Madam
Okay.
Chair, because it opens up another can of worms. I thought it was a cleaner, I think I just stick, if someone else wants to make another amendment, they're more than welcome to.
All right. Okay, so on page 5, line 20, after firearms, add or ammunition. Is there a second on that?
Second.
It's been moved by Kolb, seconded by French. Is there any discussion on the amendment? Discussion? Senator Ide.
I would like to hear some discussion from the bringer of the bill on that amendment before we vote. Thank you.
Go ahead, Senator Kolb.
Bring up the bill, Madam Chair.
Bringer of the amendment, oh, the bringer of the bill, okay.
I'm rather concerned or confused on what the amendment is. It's on page 5, so can you read what it would, how it
Yes,
would read?
I've got that for you. Page 5 of the bill that is in your packet from our staff, and it would read on line 20, otherwise associates a firearms or ammunition code with a merchant or payment card transaction in a manner that allows, that was line 21, so it would add or ammunition, firearms or ammunition.
Well, can I explain why, Madam?
Go ahead, Senator Kolb.
This is important because they're gonna go, obviously without bullets, the guns are worthless. So I think tracking of this is probably of high importance, and that's why I thought it was a good amendment, Senator Larson.
All right, is there any further discussion? Further discussion? We'll vote on the amendment. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. That amendment has been adopted. Are there any further amendments on the bill? Further amendments on the bill? Seeing none, Kim, would you please call the roll?
Senate File 105 as amended, Senator French.
Aye.
Senator Hicks excused, Senator Ide. Aye. Senator Kolb,
Aye.
Senator Larson,
Aye.
Chairman Steinmetz.
Aye.
4 ayes, 5 ayes, 1 excused.
All right. That bill has passed the committee. The next bill for our consideration is Senate File 109. Welcome to the Ag Committee, Senator Beitman.
Good morning, Madam Chairman, committee members, long time no see. We got a good couple hour nap last night.
That's right.
Lady and gentlemen, I bring you Senate File 109, Prohibit Red Flag Gun Seizure Act. And thank you for passing the previous bill. Obviously, we're seeing some threats to our gun rights. You just solved one of them, and I'm bringing you another solution to another threat that's coming our way through red flag gun seizures. Let's see where to start. I guess basically in a nutshell, we all know what they are, but for the public's edification, red flag gun seizures basically violates your due process rights. You're getting your constitutional rights taken away from you without due process. And that should be absolutely unacceptable in the state of Wyoming. In fact, our Constitution, state Constitution, Article 1, Section 6, due process of law, no person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property. There's two, your liberty and your gun, without due process of law, period. It should solve itself, but unfortunately, Madam Chairman, across this country, we're seeing the opposite happen. The federal government is putting out hundreds of millions of dollars to bribe local law enforcement agencies and state law enforcement agencies into adopting these red flag gun seizures and this whole scheme. So unfortunately, we have to bring legislation to protect our citizens. That's the number one job of us legislators, is to protect rights. Not come load up the budget with pork, but to protect people's rights, and everything else is secondary. So that's what we're doing here, Madam Chairman. So if you flip over to page 2, this is where the bill begins. The short title, obviously. Now, to Senator Kolb's concern about, you'll see there's findings and declaration of authority here. I tend to disagree that these are superfluous. When I first came into the legislature, I was told we don't do findings here. Just loads up the green books. And I just took it as, okay, we don't do findings. And then a couple sessions ago, when I was escorting the Supreme Court justices out, I had a burning question I wanted to ask the Supreme Court justices. Do you guys appreciate legislative findings and legislative intent when you're hearing a case, if it's in the statute? And they said, absolutely yes. We like the direction. It takes out all ambiguity. You know how lawyers like to poke holes into everything. Having findings and the bill's intent clearly stated in plain English for the Supreme Court to understand, they say they like it. So that's why I put findings in this bill, Madam Chairman. I think it's useful. So anyway, beyond that, so you'll see the findings. I won't read them to you. I know you guys can read. It just talks about the constitutional implications of what we're doing here. On page 4, we define what a red flag gun seizure means. Means any statute, federal statute, rule, executive order, or judicial finding, or any state statute, rule, executive order, judicial finding that does any of the following. So it basically prevents you from owning, possessing a firearm unless you've been convicted of a violent felony. And you'll see violent felony throughout the bill, Madam Chairman. That's on purpose. Obviously, we don't want to, you've committed a violent felony. It's a common sense measure here that we're not going to, stick up for those guys. You'll see it all throughout the bill. Paragraph A, you'll see some reference to statute. I'll tell you what those mean at the bottom of page 4. Statute 73508, 509, and then 35, 21, 104, 105. Those are protective orders, temporary protective orders and permanent protective orders. So we're talking about unless you've been subject to a violent felony crime or subject to an order of protection. Also, we've included, this is an addition from previous iterations you've seen of this bill where we forgot to include as a condition of bond at the top of page 5. That was a oversight from previous attempts to get this law passed, but that's something that certainly we don't want to prevent a judge from being able to temporarily keep you from your firearm on a condition of bond. So it's another common sense loophole, not a loophole, but you know what I mean. So then we go on to define violent felony on page 5. Explains what this act shall mean. Flipping over to page 7, here's where we have civil actions permitted, because if you're going to violate somebody's fundamental constitutional right and not have any sort of teeth to it, we are just filling up the green books with toothless suggestions. So this protects the citizens here, 914-304. Any agency of the state, political subdivision, or law enforcement agency that employs an officer who knowingly violates any provision of this act and enforces a red flag gun seizure against any resident of the state shall be held liable. Notice it doesn't say the officer shall be held liable. It says the agency responsible for that officer. The buck has to stop somewhere, and so who's ever, issuing the order to go take somebody's firearm without due process, that agency is going to be liable. So you have, as a citizen, you will have a civil action to get immediate relief, and you don't have to wait months or years to get a remedy. So we talk about an injunction at the bottom of the page and a civil penalty. B, any interested party may bring civil action to enforce provisions of this act. Yeah, it's pretty common sense. And then had to adjust the governmental immunity language to conform with this bill. You'll see 610-106 shows up. Here again, the violent felony language, cleaning up the statutes. We don't want violent felonies, obviously, to get a break here. So we're excluding violent felonies from restoration of rights. And then the repealer, Madam Chairman, is, again, it goes, I got to log back in, I got kicked out of my statutes. But that deals with use or possession of firearms by persons convicted of certain felonies. This just takes out the nonviolent felonies, white collar crimes, embezzlement, things like that, things that are people that aren't a threat to society if they own a firearm. So it's just cleanup language, Madam Chairman.
Okay.
This act is effective immediately, and I'll stand for any questions. Thank you.
All right, questions, committee? Senator Kolb.
Thank you, Chairman. Senator Beitman, I guess drill down on this felony situation here, violent felonies. A question I come up with is, so you're a drug dealer and you got 1,000 pounds of weed, non-violent. We're going to allow those folks not to be, I don't know, adjudicated as not having weapons because they're going to have them part and parcel with their drug dealing ability. That's my concern. I mean, I do agree with some of the things you'd said, but how are we going to get around that? Is there any mechanism there that we could address that situation where there was a person, I mean, just in that particular scenario, what do we do? Or is that going to be okay?
Senator Beitman.
Madam Chairman, Senator Kolb, certainly if you got language that you think can tighten that up, go for it. I don't think a pile of weed is violent. you know, how much weed you have, it's irrelevant. The ultimate goal, Madam Chairman, is to protect the rights of innocent Wyoming people from having their due process rights trampled and their Second Amendment rights trampled by these red flag gun laws. I don't care about drug dealers. I don't care about piles of weed. I care about the innocent people who are going to get their guns taken away, possibly in a red flag situation. There's always what ifs, always. If we do what ifs on everything, we won't pass a single bill in this legislative body. We have to have faith in the process, faith in our courts, faith in our law enforcement, and faith in each other. But certainly, if there's something in there that you don't like that you can possibly bring a fix to, I'll be all ears, and I'll work with you on that, sir.
All right,
One
follow up?
There's one follow-up. A declaration of authority, do you think is the same as findings of fact?
Madam
Go
Chairman,
ahead.
yeah, I do. I think it's important to add color to what we're trying to do here.
Well,
Senator Ide.
Oh, sorry.
I mean Kolb. It's been a long night.
yeah, we all have, a short night last night. No, I think yours is appropriate. I think it fits the bill. That was my point. I see it as helpful. Okay, so thank you.
Thank you, Senator Kolb. And I would agree. We had a bill, our federal land use bill, where we declared our authority in that as well. And so I appreciate that about this bill. Further questions for the sponsor? Further questions? Seeing none, stick around. We'll have you come up when we're ready to work the bill. Is there any further public comment on this bill? Is anybody from the agency? Go ahead, come on up.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name's Rick King. I'm Chief Game Warden for the state of Wyoming. First off, I'd like to just quickly apologize to Senator Beitman. I didn't review this bill in a timely fashion, but I did just want to highlight one potential agency impact for your consideration. So currently, there is a statute in Title 23 that provides for the forfeiture of equipment, including firearms, for a couple of our most egregious poaching violations. And so this bill would conflict with that. There, as it's written, there isn't an exception to that current Title 23 statute that provides for forfeiture. That Title 23 statute, it's 236208, and it provides that for wanton destruction and our winter range poaching, what we've referred to as winter range poaching, a person could have their firearm forfeited, but it requires a couple of things. One, it requires that they're convicted through due process of one of those violations, and then it also requires a court order for that forfeiture. So I just wanted to highlight that concern. I think there's, if it was the pleasure of the bill sponsor or the members of the committee, we could offer a simple amendment that would remove that conflict with 236208. Again, just wanted to highlight that impact to our agency. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. King. I was thinking I had you confused with someone else when I saw you here on this bill, so thank you for clarifying that. We'll let the good sponsor of the bill do some thinking on that, and maybe the two of you could confer a little bit before we work the bill, and you could decide how he'd like to deal with that. Any questions for Mr. King? Questions for Mr. King? Thank you for being here. We appreciate you catching that.
Thank you.
All right, further public testimony on the bill. Who's next? Mr. Moody, welcome back.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, members of the committee. Mark Moody, here from Laramie County. Support the bill 100%, especially preventing federal dollars to be used to take away our firearm rights. Stand for questions.
Any questions? Questions? Seeing none?
Thank you.
You got off easy. All right, next up, Mr. Jones, did you have some public comments? Is it green?
There's green. It was
All
red.
right, there you go.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman and committee. I'm going to introduce myself again in case there's people watching. I'm Mark Jones. I'm a national director with Gun Owners of America. We represent about 3 million Americans, live in Wyoming. We certainly support the concepts in this bill. In the summer of 2022, the Biden administration made red flag money available to the states to attempt to, basically to try to bribe the states to implement red flag gun confiscation orders. To my knowledge, we checked the other day, Wyoming has not taken this money, but there is always the threat that Wyoming might, or certain entities in the state might, and so this is a very important piece of legislation. Red flag laws or red flag gun confiscation orders violate at least 4 amendments to the U.S. Constitution: the 2nd, 4th, 5th, and 14th. They violate your Second Amendment rights, your rights not to be subject to unlawful searches and seizures. They violate your rights to due process. They violate your rights to go in front of a grand jury. So they're one of the most egregious forms of action that our government takes. So we certainly support the attempts here. This legislation actually complements the Second Amendment Protection Act that this legislature passed in 2022. And when that was passed, many of us said we can always complement and improve upon the existing legislation. There are 2 paths to relief for an aggrieved person whose rights are violated under the law. One is civil, one is criminal. We certainly agree with and would support the civil penalties found in this bill, but we would encourage you to consider adding criminal penalties consistent with the existing Wyoming Second Amendment Protection Act. I would point out to the folks that may not understand this, to get relief under one of these civil penalties, you're going to have to hire an attorney. You're going to have to get standing in court in front of appointed judges. It's going to be a very expensive and laborious process. I'm glad it's in there. I think every law like this should have both civil and criminal. But by itself, it's not an end-all be-all. Unless you're a very wealthy individual, you may have a hard time getting relief under the civil path in front of appointed judges. Remember, our judges are appointed in Wyoming. If we add the criminal path, that puts elected county prosecutors in a position, and again, elected county prosecutors in a position where they should enforce Wyoming law. So I encourage you to amend the bill to include the criminal penalty that we currently have in our Wyoming statutes that was passed in 2022. But we certainly support the concepts in the bill. We agree with the bringer of the bill about legislative findings. They're good for the courts to understand intent. And our main concern and request would be that you consider tying this to our Second Amendment Protection Act and adding criminal penalties so that our citizens at least have the option of asking that county prosecutor to enforce this, because many of our citizens cannot afford the civil path. And I stand for questions.
All right, questions for Mr. Jones? Questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. I see the
Thank you, madam.
sponsor shaking his head back there, so maybe you might want to have a visit with him. Mr. Thompson, go ahead and come back up and provide us your comment on the bill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Alan Thompson with WASCOP. I apologize for not bringing a possible amendment prior to this, but as we discussed this last bill, it came to mind in the previous amendment that in this bill before you right now, Madam Chair, page 6, line 4, there is that exemption for law enforcement conducting law enforcement investigations. And in that line 4, it says ammunition from being seized as evidence. And I would ask that the committee consider adding after the word evidence or collected.
Okay, just a minute. You've
Sure.
lost me about where you're at.
I'm sorry.
Tell me which page and what line you're on.
Page 7,
Page 7,
line 4.
line 4.
And that section speaks to exemptions for law enforcement conducting law enforcement purposes, but on line 4, where it talks about ammunition from being seized as evidence, I would like the committee to consider or collected. by law enforcement in the course of a lawful investigation. And Madam Chair, I briefly spoke with the bringer of the bill just seconds ago to explain this request, because there are often times that law enforcement has firearms in their evidence pursuant to investigations. But just as common in Wyoming are things like found firearms or other non-criminal, non-really investigations that law enforcement collects a firearm in order to properly return it to the owner later on, or whatever it may be. And
All right, let me make sure I got this exactly right.
Yeah.
On page 7, line 4, after the word seized or collected by law enforcement. That's what we want to
Madam
add,
Chair,
possibly.
I would suggest after the word evidence,
Okay,
because collected doesn't always necessarily mean it's evidence.
okay, all
So
right.
seized as evidence or collected
Okay.
by
gotcha.
law enforcement.
All right. Did everybody get that? Go ahead. We're not amending it yet, but go ahead, Senator French.
Run that all by again, please.
I'll do that for you. It's page 7, line 4. Is everybody there?
Yep.
After the word evidence. I had it after seized, but it's after the word evidence. So it would say from being seized as evidence or collected by law enforcement. Or, so we just have to add or collected. We don't need by law enforcement because that's right there. It would be seized as evidence or collected by law enforcement in the course of a lawful investigation is how the sentence would finish. Does that make sense?
Yep. Thank you.
All right, and that's your proposal.
Yes, Madam Chair.
All right, do you have any other comments on the bill?
No, Madam Chair, I'd stand for questions if you have any.
Any questions? Questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. Is there any further public comment? Further public comment? Seeing none, Kim, do we have anyone online?
No, Madam Chairman, no one online.
Thank you. No one online. Public comment is closed. Senator Beitman, if you'd like to come back up. Committee, what's your pleasure on the bill? Moved by Larson, seconded by Ide. Are there any amendments to the bill? Amendments to the bill. Senator Cold.
Madam Chairman, I would move that, I make a motion for an amendment. Page 7, line 4, after evidence, insert or collected.
Is there a
Continue
second?
on by law enforcement.
All right, moved by Kolb, seconded by Larson. Kim, have you got that one? All right. Is there any discussion? Discussion, Senator Ide.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I presume the bringer of the bill has discussed that with the person, whether they prefer to have that language in there or not. Just thought I'd check on that first.
Thank you for that, Senator Ide. Senator Beitman, are you all right with that language?
Madam Chair, on face, it seems relatively harmless. I haven't had more than 5 minutes to ruminate on it and talk to legal counsel as to the ramifications of the word collect. We know what seized means. These are just terms of art, legal terms of art, and I'm not a lawyer and I don't pretend to be one. But on its face, I don't see it as detrimental to the bill, but I'll yield to your discretion as to whether or not you think it's a good idea.
Seized or collected by law enforcement in the course of a lawful investigation. So that is, Mr. Thompson, would you like to come back up and tell us what or collected legally means?
Madam Chair, thank you. I wouldn't attempt to say what it legally means, but as I ruminate about it a little bit, I think receive might also work in there. I'm just would like to suggest there are other ways that we receive firearms that are not pursuant to seizure in an investigation. And it's not because we're in the act of seizing a firearm pursuant to a red flag.
Give us an example.
Somebody's driving down the road and they see a firearm laying on the side of the road and they call us or they pick it up bring it to the sheriff's office, bring it to the police department, and turn it in. And, you know, it's a found firearm, and then we're going to, like a bicycle or like anything else, try and attempt to identify the owner and return the item to the owner. So it's not a crime to have a firearm on the side of the road unless it was, you know, part of a criminal investigation. Most often they're not. Found firearms occur in Wyoming on a regular basis.
All right. Senator Kolb, would you consider that a friendly amendment to make it or received?
I would. Yeah, Madam Chair, I would. It seems like people are unsure about what the right word is. I think I still like collected, it's a placeholder. And if we want to amend it on the floor, I think that maybe everyone has more time to think about it and as a term of art.
All right. Would that satisfy you, Senator Beitman?
Madam Chairman, I think you could go either way. We could hold off, and I could certainly work with Mr. Thompson between now and committee of the whole and get exact language, so we're not building the plane while we're flying. Or
Like to withdraw?
we could put in collect as a placeholder now and have a committee, or have a standing committee amendment, and then possibly have to amend the standing committee amendment later. So I'll yield to the discretion of the committee, but there's a couple different ways to go about it. Now,
Senator Beitman, as chairman, I'm going to say that we proceed with this because we're all getting a little tired.
Yeah.
And I would hate for us to miss it. So by making this amendment, it indicates to us that we need to keep an eye on this and make sure it's exactly right. Would you agree with that?
Go for it. Thank you.
All right.
Madam
All
Chair.
those in favor of the amendment, go ahead, Senator French.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I've got two words here. As evidence or collected, and then it was mentioned received. Which is it? Just or?
We're doing collected.
Only.
Or collected.
Okay.
No received.
Thank you.
Does everyone know what the amendment is? Are we ready to go? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. That amendment has been adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill? Further amendments to the bill? Senator French.
Madam Chairman, just for clarification, it was brought up by Mr. King, I believe, the Chief Game Warden, that there was some that they had penalties if for poaching, wanton destruction of animals. Where are we at on that?
Senator Beitman.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. If I could, I'll read you parts of 23-6208 and tell you why I don't think it applies to this bill. Specifically, you see language in here that may be seized by any law enforcement officer of the state after hearing, not before, after hearing and upon order issued by the court of original jurisdiction. And then it goes on to talk about any device or equipment seized under this section shall be forfeited to the state, provided that the device or equipment is not subject to forfeiture under any, okay, and it goes on, by reason of any lawful act committed without knowledge or consent of the owner. Okay, at the bottom it says a device or equipment seized under this section shall not be forfeited as provided under this section until after the person has been convicted and the time for appeal is expired. So that doesn't sound like a red flag to me. That sounds like due process as it should occur. So I don't think this bill contemplates that. I told Mr. King I would talk to our LSO attorneys about this to make sure this bill doesn't rope in 23-6208, and I assured him if it did, I would bring an amendment to fix it. But from what I can tell and from what I can read in 23-6208, I don't think it would be considered a red flag seizure. So I don't
Thank you,
think an
Senator
amendment is
Beitman.
necessary
And
at this
I'm
time.
wondering if provision E doesn't address that on page 7 as well, because that would be considered law enforcement, would it not?
Correct.
And so, Mr. King, if you could look at page 7, subsection E, I think I would direct you to that as in your discussions with Senator Beitman on the bill, and we will stand down on this for now, and if we need to work something out on the floor, we'll back you up on that. Would that be all right? Okay, but please look at subsection E. So with that, Senator Ide.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll be real quick here. I wanted to ask Senator Beitman a question regarding the comments of Mark Jones with gun owners regarding the criminal penalties and trying to strengthen the SEPA bill from 2022. Would you give us your thoughts on that? Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Ide. That's a good question.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Senator Ide, yeah, I agree. I think Mr. Jones was spot on. Not everybody can afford a lawyer in civil court, and it would get very expensive, and these judges are appointed, and we know how that goes, and some judge shopping goes in this state in light of some recent legislation we've passed. So yeah, I would be for adding criminal penalties, but I'm also for passing a bill out of the other chamber. And I know how difficult that is, but certainly, yeah, long story short, yes, I do support criminal penalties for reasons stated by Mr. Jones.
All right, and so if there's some revisions you can agree on, you both know how to get a hold of each other.
Absolutely.
So, all right, are there any further amendments? Any further discussion on the bill? Further discussion? Seeing none, Kim, would you please call the roll?
Senate File 109 as amended, Senator French,
Aye.
Senator Hicks excused, Senator Ide,
Aye.
Senator Kolb,
Aye.
Senator Larson,
Aye.
Chairman Steinmetz.
Aye.
5 ayes, 1 excused.
All right, Senate File 109 has passed the committee. With that, that concludes our work, so there will be no Tuesday evening meeting. Good job, everyone.
Thank you.
Yes,
Thank you.
so take the evening off if we can get it and do some other work. That concludes the Senate Ag Committee hearing. We're adjourned.